My name is Edie Usher. I am 29 years old. Last Christmas, my father looked me in the eyes and called me an idiot because I kept a gift from my grandmother. The gift was a check for $5 million. My father tore his check apart. My mother ripped hers into pieces. My sister threw hers into the fireplace and filmed it burning for social media. My brother crushed his under the table like trash. I was the only person who quietly folded mine and placed it inside my purse. I looked at my grandmother and said, "Thank you." The next morning, a bank manager locked the office door behind me, sat down across from me, and said 4 words I will never forget. "It's all completely real." After that moment, my family spent the next year trying to take back the thing they laughed at. And what they did destroyed every lie I still believed about family. But to understand how everything fell apart, you need to go back to the last Christmas Eve my grandmother ever saw. My grandmother never locked her front door. Not once in 47 years. Every Saturday, I drove up the snowy hill to her little house with the white fence and the old cedar tree leaning near the porch. Every Saturday, the house smelled exactly the same. Smoke from the fireplace. Fresh banana bread. Old books. And something warm that made the whole place feel safe. That December afternoon, I carried a paper bag of apples from the small tree behind my rental house. She opened the door before I even knocked. She wore her favorite corn yellow sweater. The same sweater she wore almost every winter. Her silver hair was pinned back loosely, and she smiled the second she saw me. "There's my girl," she said softly. Then she kissed my forehead and held my face in both hands for a second, like she always did. Like she was making sure I was still okay. "Tell me about your class," she said. She asked me that every Saturday. And she always listened like the answer mattered. We sat at the kitchen table with old teacups that never matched. I told her about Daniel, one of my 3rd graders. He barely spoke during group work. But when he wrote stories, they were beautiful. Sometimes heartbreaking. "He's smart," I said. "He just gets scared around people." My grandmother stirred her tea slowly. "What do you think he needs?" she asked. "Patience," I answered. She nodded. "Then give him patience." That was how she was. She never rushed people. Not children. Not sadness. Not life. I told her about the broken bed frame I bought at a flea market. She laughed so hard she nearly spilled her tea. "That bed is haunted," she said. "Probably by a farmer who disapproves of your reading habits." I laughed too. Then I noticed her hand shaking when she set the cup down. Just a little. I pretended not to see. We knitted together for a while. She worked on something small and gray that she refused to show me. I struggled with a scarf I had started months earlier. Outside the window, the bright red cardinal landed at the feeder. It grabbed one seed. Then flew away. My grandmother watched it carefully. Like she had been waiting for it. When I left that afternoon, she handed me a thick envelope. Inside were 2 crisp $20 bills for gas. She gave me the same envelope every month. I never spent the money. I kept every envelope in a shoebox under my bed because the money itself wasn't important. It was her way of saying she loved me. I didn't know then that it was one of the last Saturdays I would ever spend with her. On my drive home, my mother called. She never called to ask how I was doing. She called to see what I had. Or what she might need from me. "Edie, honey," she said. "You visiting the old lady again?" That was what she called my grandmother. Never Grandma. Never Sylvia. Just the old lady. "I go every Saturday," I said. "She's fine," my mother answered quickly. "She has her pension." My brother Grant was with her. I could hear him chewing loudly in the background. "Hey, Edie," he said. "Need a ride Monday?" "Truck's acting up." "I have class Monday." Then after class. Like my time belonged to him. My sister Holland texted me before the call even ended. Can you send me $200? Just until Friday. 3 heart emojis followed. My mother kept talking. Christmas dinner is at her place. Your father wants roast this year. And don't let her cook too much. She gets tired and then sits there staring at everyone. Nobody asked how my grandmother felt. Nobody asked if her hip still hurt. Nobody asked why her hands shook. And suddenly I realized something. I had spent years waiting for one of them to care. But they never would. Before hanging up, my mother lowered her voice. And Edie, don't let her convince you to move in with her someday. She'll take advantage of your kindness. I stared through the snowy windshield. My grandmother had never taken advantage of anyone. Not once. The first thing my grandmother asked me to promise her was not to save her life. It was to keep her secret. She told me in October while we worked in her garden. The air smelled like rosemary and cold dirt. The sunset painted everything orange. She sat down heavily on the wooden bench beside the tomatoes. You remember Dr. Okafor? She asked. Yes. I saw her Tuesday. Then she looked down at her hands. Pancreatic cancer, she said quietly. Stage 4. The world suddenly felt tilted. I couldn't breathe for a second. But deep inside, I think I already knew. I had noticed how tired she looked. How slowly she moved. How long? I whispered. Since July. Are you starting treatment? She shook her head gently. No. I want my time here. In this house. In my garden. With my books. With you. Tears burned my eyes. Grandma. I'm 82, Edie, she said softly. I've had a beautiful life. Then she reached over and squeezed my hand. I'm not scared, she said. I'm sorting. The wind moved through the garden quietly. She clipped a small piece of rosemary and placed it into my hand. I need you to promise me something. Anything. Don't tell them. I stared at her. What? I don't want Christmas to become a funeral before I'm gone. Her eyes drifted toward the trees. I want one more Christmas where everybody pretends we're still a family. Then she smiled. A sharp little smile. And I have a few things to give out first. I barely slept after that. Thanksgiving passed. Then December. Then Christmas Eve arrived. Every member of my family walked into my grandmother's house carrying fake smiles and hidden expectations. My father arrived first. Richard Usher. Tall. Loud. Always acting like every room belonged to him. He stomped snow off his boots, opened the fridge without asking, and immediately started complaining about the drive. My mother followed behind him, pretending sweetness. Oh Sylvia, the tree is adorable. But her eyes scanned the room carefully. Studying everything. Counting value. Grant came next with a young girlfriend who looked uncomfortable the entire night. Still teaching kids? He asked me. When are you getting a real job? He laughed. But it wasn't really a joke. Holland arrived last. Phone already recording. Christmas vibes, she said to her followers while filming the fireplace. She barely hugged our grandmother. Everything with Holland felt fake. Even her smile. My grandmother moved quietly around the kitchen. Slow. Careful. Watching everyone. Not angry. Not surprised. Just watching. Her best friend Margaret stopped by briefly with honey from her farm. Before leaving, she touched my arm in the hallway. You know you're the only one she talks about, right? She whispered. I didn't know what to say. Dinner started. The radio played old Christmas songs. Turkey hissed in the kitchen. Snow fell softly outside. And then my grandmother stood. She cleared her throat. Nobody stopped talking. I have something for each of you, she said. Finally everyone looked at her. She brought over a small wooden box. Inside were 5 cream-colored envelopes. She handed one to each person. Mine came last. When she placed it beside me, she touched my shoulder gently. My father opened his first. His face changed instantly. Confusion. Shock. Suspicion. Inside was a check. $5 million. Grant burst out laughing. Is this a joke? Holland giggled. My mother stared at the number silently. Then my father spoke. It's fake, he snapped. Don't be stupid. He threw the check onto his plate. Gravy soaked the corner. My mother slowly tore hers in half. Honestly, Sylvia. This isn't funny. Grant crushed his into a ball and tossed it under the table. Holland stood dramatically and dropped hers into the fireplace while recording. The flames curled around the paper. The check blackened and disappeared. My grandmother didn't react. She only looked at me. I folded mine carefully. Placed it into my purse. And said quietly, "Thank you, Grandma." She nodded once. That was all. I drove home through heavy snow holding the steering wheel tightly. My hands shook. Not because of the money. Because of the way she looked at me. Like she already knew what everyone else would do. At home, I placed the check on my kitchen table under the yellow light. The paper felt real. Heavy. Official. I flipped it over. On the back, in blue ink, she had written, "For the one who still comes on Saturdays." I sat on the kitchen floor and cried. The next morning, I drove to First National Hollow Ridge. I only wanted verification. I thought maybe there had been some mistake. The bank manager, Benedict Strom, smiled when I entered. Then he saw the check. His entire face lost color. "Edie," he whispered. "Come with me." He led me into a private office and locked the door. My heart pounded. "Is it real?" I asked. He stared at the check for a long moment. Then he looked at me carefully. "Your grandmother came here in November," he said quietly. "She moved funds into a special account. I personally prepared these checks." I couldn't speak. "It's real," he continued. "All of it." Then he took a slow breath. "And this is only part of it." The room spun. "There's more?" "There's a lawyer who will contact you." He folded his hands. "Your grandmother was extremely wealthy, Edie." I walked out of that bank with $5 million in my account and the terrifying feeling that my life had just changed forever. I drove straight to my grandmother's house. She sat in the kitchen drinking coffee like nothing unusual had happened. "You went to the bank," she said. "Yes." "Was Benedict kind?" He looked terrified. She smiled faintly. Then she told me everything. My grandfather had left her money years ago. She invested carefully. Read constantly. Learned quietly. Made smart decisions. And over time, her money grew into more than $40 million. I stared at her. "Why didn't anyone know?" She shrugged softly. "Nobody ever asked." Then she looked directly at me. "I didn't give them money on Christmas Eve," she said. "I gave them a chance." "A chance for what?" "To ask why." My phone exploded with calls before lunch. Texts. Voicemails. Panic. Holland begged for her check back. Grant screamed that I stole family money. My mother cried dramatically into voicemail. My father demanded answers. I turned my phone face down. My grandmother calmly ate toast while the chaos grew. Then my father arrived. He pounded on the front door. "You gave her $5 million, he shouted. My grandmother stood behind the glass calmly. "I gave all of you $5 million, she answered. "You know what I mean. You destroyed yours. Open this door." "No, Richard." Then, for the first time in 47 years, she locked the front door. My father stood outside frozen with rage. She returned to the kitchen, picked up her toast, and quietly said, "Well, that's begun." A few weeks later, she slipped on ice while feeding the cardinal. By the time Margaret found her, she had been outside nearly 40 minutes. The hospital wanted to keep her. She refused. She chose hospice care at home. I moved into the spare bedroom. I took leave from school. Every night, I read to her. Old books. Stories she loved. Sometimes she slept while I read. Sometimes she corrected my pronunciation. Sometimes she just held my hand. One evening, she gave me a brass key. When the lawyer asks, she whispered, "Give him this." What does it open? You'll see. My grandmother died early on a cold February morning. The house became impossibly quiet. I held her hand until it cooled. The cardinal came to the feeder one last time. One seed. Then gone. I called Margaret. Then my father. He sounded emotional for one brief second. Then my mother took the phone. "When's the funeral?" she asked immediately. "I have something planned next week." I hung up. The funeral happened that Saturday. My grandmother had left instructions. No speech from my father. Her yellow sweater. A poem read by me. Everyone cried loudly. Holland filmed parts of the funeral for social media. I didn't cry until later that night when the house was finally empty. Then the fighting truly began. Before the cemetery workers had even finished their coffee, my father called the lawyer asking about the will. Grant came to my house demanding answers. "Who gets the house?" he asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. He didn't believe me. The official reading happened 2 weeks later. We all sat around a long wooden table in Halverson's office. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. My father looked impatient. My mother looked nervous. Holland kept checking her phone. Halverson opened the file carefully. He read smaller gifts first. Then he reached the main estate. "The remaining estate," he said calmly, "including the home, land, investments, and personal assets valued at approximately $40 million, is left entirely to Edie Rosemary Usher." Silence. Pure silence. Then my father exploded. "Is this a joke?" "No," Halverson answered. "It's a legal document." My mother gasped softly. Grant stared at me. Holland slowly raised her phone. Then Halverson continued reading. "She's the only one who visited me for love and not obligation. She came every Saturday expecting nothing." My father sat back down heavily. His face looked pale. The lawsuit arrived 4 days later. Undue influence. They claimed I manipulated my dying grandmother into giving me everything. I laughed when I read it. Not because it was funny. Because the alternative was screaming. Halverson agreed to represent me for free. "Your grandmother trusted me for decades," he said. "I intend to honor that." The months before court were miserable. Holland made dramatic online videos about betrayal. Grant sent angry texts. My father demanded family meetings. I returned to teaching because my students needed stability. Daniel hugged me the first morning back. That almost broke me. In May, Halverson helped me open the safe my grandmother left behind. Inside were medical records proving she was mentally healthy. Careful legal papers. And something else. A journal. Every page recorded one Saturday I visited. Every single one. "Edie came tired today. Edie brought apples. We laughed about pie. Edie cried during the story." Hundreds of entries. Hundreds. She had counted every Saturday for years. I cried sitting on her bedroom floor. Not because of the money. Because she remembered every visit. The court hearing finally arrived in October. Dr. Okafor testified that my grandmother was completely mentally capable. Margaret testified that nobody could control Sylvia Usher. Then I took the stand. The lawyer asked me question after question. Finally he asked, "Why do you think she left you everything?" I looked at the judge. Then at the empty seat beside Margaret. And answered honestly. Because I came on Saturdays. That was all. The judge ruled in my favor. The lawsuit was dismissed. Outside the courtroom, my father lost control. "You are the worst daughter I ever had," he shouted. A reporter heard every word. The newspaper printed it. Small towns remember things. Especially ugly things. Soon everything in my family began collapsing. My father lost his job permanently. My mother's spa lost customers. Grant's business failed. Holland's marriage collapsed after her husband discovered hidden debt. One by one, everything cracked apart. And through all of it, I kept thinking about my grandmother quietly feeding our town for decades without telling anyone. I discovered it while cleaning her desk. A small notebook hidden beneath a drawer. Every year carefully listed. Milk programs. School books. Band instruments. Scholarships. She had secretly donated to my elementary school for 40 years. The same school where I taught. The same school where Daniel drank milk every day. My grandmother had helped generations of children. Silently. Without praise. Without attention. Without ever asking for credit. That discovery changed me more than the money did. Months later, my mother showed up at my kitchen door unexpectedly. She looked older. Smaller. Tired. Not dramatic. Not polished. Just exhausted. We sat quietly with tea. Then she finally admitted something. "She forgave me," my mother whispered. I looked up. "She left me a letter," she continued. "She said she forgave me years ago." Then she cried. Not fake crying. Real crying. The kind that leaves a person shaking. Eventually she asked softly if I could help save her business. I looked at her for a long time. Then I answered honestly. "I'm not giving you money." She nodded. She expected that answer. "But I am creating a scholarship fund in Grandma's name," I continued. "For children who need help." My mother cried harder. When she left, I said one final thing. "I'm not angry anymore. I just don't know you." She nodded without turning around. Then she walked away. A few months later, I resigned from my school. I created the Sylvia Usher Scholarship Fund with $20 million. Tuition. Books. Food. Help for any child who needed it. Halverson cried quietly when I signed the papers. I kept my grandmother's house. Margaret turned part of it into a bookstore. Then I packed my Subaru and drove north to Maine. I picked the town because the name sounded peaceful. Newberry Cove. The drive took 2 days. My grandmother's yellow sweater rode beside me in the passenger seat. When I reached Maine, I bought terrible gas station coffee and laughed for the first time in over a year. Real laughter. The cottage I rented overlooked the ocean. Small. Quiet. Perfect. That first night, I placed the yellow sweater over the chair beside the window. And suddenly it felt like she was there. A week later, Margaret mailed me a note. "Sylvia always said you belonged near the ocean," it read. I cried after reading it. The next year, I taught 4th grade in Newberry Cove. My classroom faced the Atlantic Ocean. I had 18 students. One quiet little girl reminded me of Daniel. So I gave her patience. I gave her time. Just like my grandmother taught me. The scholarship fund helped dozens of children that first year. I read every application personally. Every single one. My father mailed me a birthday card that summer. The first one in years. Inside he wrote only 4 words. I hope you're well. I never answered. But I didn't throw it away either. One evening, a skinny yellow cat wandered through my screen door and curled up on my grandmother's sweater. I named him Cather. He slept there every night. Like he understood something important. One August evening, I sat on my porch watching the sun disappear over the water. I wrote my grandmother a letter. I told her about my students. About the cat. About the ocean. About the life she gave me. And finally, I understood something. I hadn't inherited her money because I was smarter than everyone else. Or better. I inherited it because I showed up. Because I stayed. Because when she needed someone beside her, I came. Every Saturday. Not for money. Not for reward. Just because I loved her. I folded the letter carefully and placed it into the same wooden box she used on Christmas Eve. Then I stood up and looked through the window. Cather stared at me impatiently from the sweater. Dinner time. I smiled. Coming, I whispered. And for the first time in a very long time, the word home finally meant something again. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories like this. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place?